My beloved child, pause for just a moment, because there are quiet moments in life that seem ordinary on the surface, yet they carry the power to change the direction of two hearts forever. This is one of those moments. Long before anyone spoke the words aloud, I had already seen the silent questions resting inside your heart. I know the nights when you wondered whether your place in someone's story was real or only a passing chapter. I know the moments when hope felt distant, yet something deep within you refused to let go. That quiet strength was never meaningless. It was preparing you for a truth that would arrive in a way no one expected. Listen carefully, because what unfolded was not loud, dramatic, or rushed. It happened through a single conversation, hidden behind ordinary voices, where someone looked into your soulmate's eyes and gently suggested a different future. They spoke with confidence. They described another path. They talked about moving on. They spoke about marriage as though love could simply be replaced by convenience. Their words sounded practical, reasonable, even kind. Anyone listening from the outside might have believed they were offering wisdom. Yet they did not understand what had already taken root inside your soulmate's heart. Some connections are formed slowly, almost invisibly, until one day they become impossible to ignore. Your soulmate remained silent at first. Silence often hides more truth than quick answers ever could. Every second of that silence carried memories no one else in the room could see. They remembered unexpected smiles, conversations that lingered long after they ended, moments that seemed ordinary until distance revealed their true value. They remembered the feeling of peace that appeared whenever thoughts of you quietly entered their mind. Those memories were speaking far louder than the voices around them. Don't skip this moment, because something important is waiting for you. The people encouraging your soulmate believed they understood the situation completely. They thought time had erased what once mattered. They believed the future could be planned like a schedule written neatly on paper. But hearts do not follow calendars. They do not surrender simply because someone believes they should. Your soulmate listened respectfully, yet inside, another conversation was taking place. It was not a battle between you and someone else. It was a battle between expectation and authenticity. Between choosing what seemed easier and choosing what felt deeply true. Few people ever notice when such a decision begins. It starts quietly, almost invisibly, inside a single heartbeat. That heartbeat cannot be forced to change direction. It only grows stronger when it recognizes something genuine. Stay till the end, because the smallest detail in this story changes everything. While others continued speaking, your soulmate noticed something unexpected. Every future they imagined without you felt strangely incomplete. Nothing looked entirely wrong, yet nothing felt fully alive either. It was as though every imagined celebration carried an invisible absence they could not explain. They smiled politely, but inside they asked themselves a question they had never dared to face before. Why does every path keep leading back to the same person? Why does every hopeful vision somehow carry the same familiar presence? That realization did not arrive dramatically. It settled softly, like morning light entering a quiet room. And once light enters, darkness never looks quite the same again. There are moments when people discover not who they should love, but who has quietly become part of their future without asking for permission. Your soulmate was beginning to understand that difference. They were no longer comparing possibilities. They were recognizing something that had already become part of who they were. Even the advice surrounding them began to sound distant, not because it lacked kindness, but because it no longer matched the truth growing within them. Sometimes life becomes clearer not when new answers appear, but when old doubts gently disappear. You may not have witnessed this moment with your own eyes, yet that does not make it any less meaningful. Some of the greatest turning points happen where no audience exists. They unfold quietly, shaping tomorrow before anyone realizes today has changed. As the conversation continued, another unexpected thought crossed your soulmate's mind. They realized they had been measuring love by certainty when it had always been growing through consistency. They remembered how thoughts of you returned without effort, how your presence brought calm instead of confusion, how even unanswered questions never erased the quiet hope they carried. Those realizations could no longer be ignored. They were becoming impossible to replace. And then, just when everyone believed they already knew what the answer would be, your soulmate slowly lifted their eyes. Before a single word left their lips, the entire atmosphere shifted in a way no one could explain. It was not because they raised their voice. It was because genuine conviction carries its own quiet strength. What they were about to say would surprise every person listening, not through drama, but through honesty. And the first sentence they chose would begin changing everything in a way no one in that room expected. The room had grown unusually still, not because everyone had finished speaking, but because they sensed that your soulmate was about to reveal something they had been carrying in silence for far too long. There are moments when a single honest sentence outweighs 100 carefully prepared arguments, and this was one of those moments. Without rushing, without trying to convince anyone, your soulmate took a quiet breath and finally spoke. "I understand why you're saying this," they said gently, "but my heart has already made a choice that my mind can no longer pretend not to see." Those words were not spoken with defiance. They were spoken with peace. And sometimes peace is the strongest answer a person can give. The conversation changed immediately, not because everyone agreed, but because they realized they were no longer speaking to someone who was uncertain. They were speaking to someone who had finally become honest with themselves. It is remarkable how clarity often arrives after seasons of confusion. Your soulmate had spent countless quiet moments questioning their own feelings, wondering whether they should let go, whether distance meant the connection had faded, whether waiting had become unreasonable. But every attempt to move away from the truth only brought them closer to it. Every distraction eventually ended with the same realization. Every new plan somehow circled back to thoughts of you. They began to understand that what remained after every distraction disappeared was often the deepest truth of all. Something important is waiting for you, because this realization did not happen overnight. It was built through countless small moments that only the heart remembers. One person in the room smiled kindly and asked another question. "But what if there's someone else who could make you happy?" It sounded like a fair question. Many would have paused to think. Your soulmate did pause, but only long enough to recognize the answer that had already been living inside them. Happiness, they realized, is not found by searching endlessly for someone new whenever life becomes uncertain. Sometimes happiness quietly grows beside the person whose presence continues bringing peace, even when circumstances are imperfect. They looked down for a brief moment, remembering conversations that still echoed in their heart, remembering hope that refused to disappear, remembering a connection that felt calm rather than forced. That memory became their answer before words ever returned. Don't skip this moment, because what happened next revealed something even deeper. Instead of explaining everything, your soulmate shared only one simple truth. I don't want to build a future by forgetting someone who helped me become the person I am today. The room fell silent again. No one had expected such a gentle answer. There was no blame. No resentment. No dramatic declaration. Only gratitude. Only sincerity. And sincerity has a quiet way of reaching places that arguments never can. As those words settled into the room, something unexpected happened inside the people listening. They began looking at your soulmate differently. Until that moment, they had assumed this was only a passing attachment, something time would naturally erase. But now they saw consistency instead of impulse. They saw patience instead of confusion. They saw someone whose feelings had matured rather than faded. Even those who still disagreed could no longer dismiss what they had heard. Genuine conviction is difficult to argue against because it asks for no permission. Perhaps you have wondered whether unseen moments can truly change the future. They can. Often the most meaningful turning points happen quietly, without applause or recognition. No celebration marked this conversation. No one declared that history had changed. Yet something invisible shifted. Your soulmate stopped carrying their feelings as a secret burden and started accepting them as part of who they were. That acceptance brought a calm they had not felt in a long time. The questions that once kept them awake began losing their power. The uncertainty slowly gave way to quiet confidence. Stay till the end, because another realization was beginning to unfold. After the conversation ended, your soulmate walked away alone for a little while. They did not immediately call anyone. They did not rush to explain themselves. Instead, they allowed the silence to speak. Sometimes silence reveals what noise has hidden. As they reflected on everything that had been said, they noticed something extraordinary. Instead of feeling exhausted by defending their feelings, they felt lighter. As though honesty had removed a weight they had carried for far too long. They looked at the sky almost absent-mindedly and smiled to themselves. Not because every problem had disappeared, but because they finally understood that genuine affection does not need constant proof to remain real. It simply remains. Quietly. Faithfully. Patiently. That realization filled them with unexpected hope. They no longer felt trapped between other people's expectations and their own heart. For the first time in a long while, those two paths had become one. Yet the story was far from over. As your soulmate continued walking, their phone vibrated unexpectedly. It was not the message they anticipated. It was not from the person anyone in that room would have guessed. The words on that screen carried a quiet reminder connected to you. One small detail capable of awakening memories they believed they had already fully understood. They stopped walking immediately, read the message twice, and whispered to themselves, "Maybe this is why I couldn't let go." They had no idea that what they were about to discover next would connect every unanswered question, every silent feeling, and every unexpected conversation into one unforgettable truth. And that next moment would challenge everything they thought they already understood about the connection they carried within their heart. The message remained on the screen longer than expected. Your soulmate did not rush to reply. Instead, They simply stared at those few words as though they had unlocked a door that had quietly been waiting to open. Sometimes it is not the length of a message that changes a person. Sometimes it is the feeling that arrives while reading it. In that instant, memories began returning, not as scattered fragments, but as a complete picture that had been hidden beneath everyday life. They remembered conversations that had once seemed ordinary, moments they had almost overlooked, quiet exchanges that carried more meaning than they understood at the time. One by one, those moments aligned like stars finally forming a recognizable constellation. They realized they had not been holding on to the past. They had been growing toward a future they were only now beginning to recognize. The words from earlier that day echoed softly within them. Forget them. Move forward. Build a different life. At first, those suggestions had sounded reasonable. But now, standing alone with nothing except honesty surrounding them, they understood something profound. Real connections are not measured by how easily they can be replaced. They are recognized by how naturally they continue to bring peace, even after silence, distance, or uncertainty. That realization settled gently within them, replacing every remaining doubt with quiet confidence. Something important is waiting for you, because this understanding became the foundation for everything that followed. Without realizing it, your soulmate smiled. It was not the kind of smile meant for other people to notice. It was the quiet smile that appears when the heart finally stops arguing with itself. There is a rare kind of relief that comes only after a person accepts what has been true all along. They no longer needed to search for reasons to justify how they felt. They no longer needed to compare one possibility against another. The answer had become beautifully simple. Every time they imagined genuine happiness, every road somehow carried the same familiar presence. Yours. As they continued walking, they passed places that suddenly felt filled with meaning. A quiet street reminded them of a conversation that had lingered in their thoughts for days. A gentle breeze carried the memory of laughter they had never forgotten. Even the ordinary rhythm of the afternoon seemed to whisper that life often prepares its greatest moments through the smallest experiences. They realized that nothing meaningful had happened by accident. Every conversation, every unexpected meeting, every season of waiting had quietly shaped the person they had become. Looking back, they could finally see the pattern that had once been invisible. Don't skip this moment, because what happened next surprised even your soulmate. They reached into their pocket and found something they had forgotten they were carrying. It was not expensive. It held no obvious value to anyone else. Yet the instant they saw it, they remembered exactly why they had kept it. It reminded them of you. Not because it belonged to you, but because it represented a moment when they felt completely understood without needing to explain themselves. They stood there holding it for several quiet seconds, realizing that some memories never fade because they become part of who we are. At that same time, far away from where they stood, life continued moving as usual. People followed routines, completed ordinary tasks, and spoke about ordinary things. No one could have guessed that a quiet decision made earlier that day was already beginning to reshape tomorrow. This is how meaningful change often arrives. It rarely announces itself. It simply begins, unnoticed, until one day everyone realizes everything feels different. Your soulmate thought carefully about the people who had encouraged them to move on. They felt no frustration toward them. In fact, they appreciated their concern. Those people wanted what they believed was best. But they could only speak from what they could see. They could not see the countless silent moments that had strengthened this connection. They could not hear the conversations your soulmate continued having within their own heart. They could not measure the peace that appeared whenever thoughts of you returned. Some truths are invisible until they are lived. Stay till the end, because another unexpected realization was beginning to unfold. As evening approached, your soulmate returned home carrying a calmness that had been missing for a long time. They noticed how different everything felt even though nothing around them had changed. The same rooms. The same windows. The same familiar surroundings. Yet their perspective had shifted completely. They understood that certainty is not always loud. Sometimes certainty arrives as quiet peace that refuses to leave. Later that night, they sat alone and began reflecting on the years behind them. They realized they had often mistaken patience for delay. They had believed unanswered questions meant something was missing. But now they saw that patience had been teaching them to recognize what truly mattered. Every challenge had quietly removed distractions until only what was genuine remained. And when everything unnecessary had fallen away, one truth remained standing with remarkable clarity. Then something deeply personal crossed their mind. What if they never knew? The question lingered in the silence. What if you never realized how often you had been the reason they kept believing? What if you never understood that your kindness, your quiet strength, your authenticity had continued inspiring them long after conversations had ended? They wondered how many moments had passed when you had no idea that your presence had brought them comfort simply by existing in their life. That thought stayed with them longer than expected. For the first time, they no longer wanted their feelings to remain hidden forever. Not because they expected immediate answers, but because genuine affection deserves honesty. They began considering something they had avoided for a very long time, a conversation that could no longer be postponed indefinitely. Just as they reached for their phone once again, another notification appeared. This one was completely unexpected. It contained a single sentence from someone who had witnessed the earlier conversation. Those few words made your soulmate stop breathing for a brief moment. Because they revealed that after your soulmate walked away, someone in that room had quietly admitted, "I've never seen them speak with that much certainty about anyone before." And in that instant, your soulmate realized that their quiet answer had changed not only their own heart, but the hearts of everyone who had heard it. Yet the greatest surprise was still waiting, because the person who sent that message had one final truth to share, a truth about you that no one had dared to say aloud until now. The message lingered in the quiet glow of the screen, and for several long moments your soulmate did nothing except read it again. Then again. It was only one sentence, yet it carried the weight of an entire conversation that had continued even after they had left the room. Sometimes the most meaningful things are not said while we are present. They are spoken only after silence creates enough space for honesty to appear. Your soulmate felt something shift deep within them. They had walked away believing they had simply answered a difficult question. They never imagined that their answer had remained in the minds of everyone else long after the conversation ended. The person who had sent the message finally wrote another line. "You should know what happened after you left." Your soulmate's heart grew still. They opened the message slowly, almost instinctively sensing that whatever came next would not be ordinary. The words were simple. No one argued anymore. That single sentence carried unexpected meaning. The people who had once encouraged another path had stopped trying to persuade anyone. Instead, they began reflecting on what they had witnessed. One of them quietly admitted that they had mistaken patience for uncertainty. Another confessed that genuine affection cannot be measured by how loudly someone speaks about it, but by how consistently it remains through changing seasons. Even those who had entered the conversation with complete confidence left carrying new questions of their own. Your soulmate lowered the phone and looked out the window. They realized something they had never considered before. Honesty has a quiet influence. It rarely changes minds through force. It changes hearts through authenticity. That realization filled them with a sense of peace unlike anything they had experienced in a long while. Something important is waiting for you, because the story was beginning to unfold in ways no one expected. A few minutes later another message arrived. This one came from the same person, but the tone felt different. There was one more thing. Your soulmate, read on. After you left, someone asked a question that nobody could answer. Immediately, curiosity replaced silence. The question had been remarkably simple. If they truly mean this much to you, when did you first realize it? No one in the room answered. Not because they didn't care. Because everyone was quietly trying to remember the exact moment they had first noticed the change within your soulmate. Some believed it happened after an ordinary conversation. Others thought it began during a season when your name seemed to appear naturally in almost every hopeful discussion. One person smiled gently and said something that surprised everyone. I don't think there was one single moment. I think it happened little by little. Every time they spoke about the future, they unknowingly left a place for the same person. Those words echoed deeply. Your soulmate had never realized that others had noticed such small details. The little pauses. The gentle smile whenever your name was mentioned. The calmness that appeared without explanation. The hope that quietly remained even during uncertain days. These were things your soulmate had never intended anyone else to see. Yet authenticity leaves traces. Not dramatic ones. Quiet ones. The kind that thoughtful people notice over time. Don't skip this moment, because another realization was gently approaching. For the first time, your soulmate stopped asking themselves whether their feelings were real. Instead, they asked a completely different question. If this has been so clear to everyone else, why did it take me so long to fully believe it myself? The answer arrived almost immediately. Because people often recognize their own hearts last. They spend so much time protecting themselves from disappointment that they overlook the quiet certainty growing inside them. Your soulmate smiled softly. Not because everything had become easy, but because everything had become honest. There is a remarkable difference. As evening settled outside, they opened an old notebook they had not touched in months. Its pages were filled with ordinary thoughts, unfinished ideas, little reminders written during busy days. While turning the pages, something unexpected caught their attention. A single sentence. Written long before today's conversation. I hope one day courage becomes stronger than hesitation. They stared at those words for a long time. They had forgotten writing them. Yet somehow they perfectly described the person they had become. The hesitation that once held them back was slowly disappearing. In its place stood quiet courage. Not the courage to control the future. Simply the courage to stop hiding the truth from themselves. Stay till the end, because what happened next connected every moment that had come before. Just before closing the notebook, a folded piece of paper slipped onto the floor. Your soulmate picked it up carefully. It wasn't a letter. It wasn't a photograph. It was something much simpler. A small handwritten list they had made long ago. At the top, they had written, "Qualities that matter most." Curious, they began reading. Kindness. Patience. Quiet strength. Honesty. Someone who brings peace instead of pressure. Someone who inspires growth. Someone who feels like home. They paused. Every word on that page reminded them of one person. Not because they were trying to make it fit. Because it already did. Without realizing it, tears of gratitude gathered in their eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming realization that the answer they had been searching for had quietly been written into their own life long before today's conversation ever happened. Then their phone vibrated one final time. The sender was different. The message contained only 8 words. "They've been hoping you'll choose your heart all along." Your soulmate froze. They immediately understood who they were referring to. And in that unforgettable moment, they realized the story was even bigger than they had imagined. Because someone unexpectedly close to you had quietly believed in this connection from the very beginning, and they were finally ready to reveal why.